One quiet afternoon in Blackstone, Massachusetts, a horrifying discovery came to light. It all began when a neighbor's 10-year-old son, who was playing at Erica Murray's house, called his mom in a panic. He had found a crying baby and didn't know what to do. Betsy Brown, the boy's mom, rushed over to help, but nothing could have prepared her for what she found inside. The smell hit her as soon as she walked in, and the sight was even worse. Garbage piled everywhere, bugs crawling around, and human waste smeared on the walls. In one room, she found two little girls, one of them just a baby, crying and covered in filth. Betsy was horrified, but she had no idea this was only the start of the nightmare. Hidden in the house were secrets even darker, secrets that would shock the entire neighborhood and reveal the tragic truth about what had been happening behind closed doors. Erica Murray was born in 1983 in the United States, the third child of Kevin and Sharon Murray. The family lived in a rural home in southern Worcester County, Massachusetts, the same house where Kevin had spent his childhood. Kevin worked as an auto mechanic, handling repairs around the house, while Sharon was a homemaker with a passion for crafts. Known throughout the neighborhood for their cheerful and sociable nature, the Murrays often hosted barbecues, bringing families together. As a child, Erica was described by those who knew her as charming, happy, and beautiful. She was fortunate to have two older siblings who enjoyed playing games like baseball and hide and seek with her. During her teenage years in the late 1990s, Erica became increasingly conscious of her appearance, always ensuring her hair was perfectly styled and her nails immaculate. She was known as a diligent student and a responsible, goal-oriented young woman. Before graduating from high school, Erica took a job at a fast food chain, where she met Raymond Rivera, a man 7 years her senior. Little is known about Raymond's life, except that he had a sister named Christine and also worked at the same restaurant. The two quickly became friends, and their relationship soon turned romantic. At first, their connection seemed loving and understanding, but it eventually shifted into a dynamic of control and possessiveness. In 2001, at the age of 18, Erica discovered she was pregnant. The news plunged her into a personal crisis. She was mortified at the thought of attending her graduation visibly pregnant. However, a close friend convinced her not to miss the milestone event. On July 17, 2001, shortly after graduating, Erica gave birth to her first child, a daughter named Kayla. The young family, Erica, Raymond, and their baby, moved in with Erica's parents. By 2003, Erica was pregnant again, and the growing family outgrew the space in her parents' home. Between 2003 and 2004, they relocated to Raymond's sister Christine's house in Blackstone, Massachusetts, where Erica gave birth to her second child, Nicola. On the surface, everything seemed idyllic. Erica frequently shared moments of joy on social media, posting birthday celebrations and details about cooking meals for her kids. The children attended school and appeared well-adjusted, presenting the image of a happy, normal family. However, behind the facade, the household descended into chaos. Over time, their home became a cluttered, unsanitary mess, though no one in their community seemed to notice. The children continued to attend school, their appearance never raising suspicion. Erica maintained her online persona, sharing updates about her daily life, including washing dishes and preparing meals. Many followers admired her seemingly picture-perfect family life. Erica worked as a sales associate at a craft store in Whiteville, but her real life began unraveling. Friends and family noticed significant changes in her. Once elegant and confident, she now dressed in baggy clothes, appeared disheveled, and rarely left the house. Erica withdrew further into isolation, which her family attributed to embarrassment over her home's disorder. But the reality was far darker. The harrowing truth Erica Murray had been hiding came to light on an ordinary afternoon thanks to her neighbor, Betsy Brown. Betsy's 10-year-old son had gone over to play with Erica's son when, after some time, he called his mother in distress. The boy was desperately asking for help to calm a crying baby. Betsy, surprised to hear there was an infant in Erica's home, decided to check the situation herself. As soon as Betsy stepped inside the Murray household, she was struck by a nauseating stench. The scene before her was shocking. The house was in an extreme state of filth and decay. The windows were covered with blankets and sheets, casting the home in darkness. Trash was piled everywhere. Rats and insects scurried in plain sight, and maggots infested various corners. Clothes and human waste were scattered across the floor. Following her son's cries, Betsy made her way to a room where she expected to find a single baby, but the reality was far worse. Inside, she discovered not one, but two children. One was an infant around 5 months old, and the other was a toddler about 3 years old. This revelation was shocking to Betsy, who had always believed Erica only had two children, a 13-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son. The two young girls were lying in separate beds, crying and rocking themselves violently back and forth. Their frail bodies were covered in filth and maggots, and they appeared to have been abandoned. Betsy, horrified by what she had seen, immediately called emergency services. She described to the operator the horrifying state of the home. Human waste smeared on the walls, baby handprints in filth, dirty diapers scattered everywhere, and baby bottles teeming with maggots. The police in Blackstone, Massachusetts, responded quickly to the call. What they encountered upon arrival was devastating: an unsanitary environment where children were living without proper hygiene, food, or medical care. This wasn't the first time authorities had been alerted to the conditions in Erica's home. In 2007, Massachusetts Child Protection Services had investigated the residence after receiving complaints about its squalid state. However, at that time, officials claimed they found no clear evidence of child neglect, and no further action was taken. This lack of intervention allowed the situation to deteriorate unchecked for years. This time, the authorities acted decisively. The Department of Children and Families took custody of all four children: Erica's 13-year-old daughter, 10-year-old son, and the two younger girls. The children were immediately subjected to medical evaluations, which revealed alarming findings. The 3-year-old girl was so malnourished she lacked the muscle strength to sit up without assistance. She was also highly sensitive to light. The 5-month-old infant had a flattened head, a condition caused by being left lying down for extended periods. Neither of the younger girls had birth records, and both were severely underweight, stark evidence of prolonged neglect. The older children's conditions were equally troubling. Both the 10-year-old boy and the 13-year-old girl were found to have severe ear infestations of maggots, and the buildup of earwax was so extreme that their eardrums were obscured. These findings painted a grim picture of years of extreme neglect and abandonment. When Erica was informed of her children's removal and the dire conditions they had been living in, her reaction shocked authorities. She showed little emotion, agreeing that the children should not remain in such an environment but displaying no visible concern over their well-being. Instead, she seemed preoccupied with the disappearance of her pet cat, a response that left many questioning her mental state and capacity for empathy. Days after the initial intervention, police conducted a more thorough search of Erica's home, armed with a warrant. What they uncovered was even more disturbing. During this second inspection, investigators found human remains in two separate closets. The decomposed bodies of three infants were discovered, one wrapped in adult sweatpants with the umbilical cord and placenta still attached. The condition suggested that the baby had been left to die shortly after birth. These gruesome discoveries highlighted an unimaginable level of neglect and disregard for human life. The remains were taken to the medical examiner's office for analysis, but the advanced state of decomposition made it difficult to determine how long the infants had been deceased. Forensic experts speculated the deaths could have occurred weeks or even years before their discovery, deepening the tragedy. The forensic report revealed that one of the infants might have been born alive, though the medical examiner could not confirm this definitively due to the condition of the remains. The discovery of these horrifying details, combined with the possibility that at least one baby had survived birth, sent shockwaves through the community and triggered intense media scrutiny of Erica Murray. When questioned by the police about whether she had given birth to other children who did not survive, Erica initially denied it. However, upon being informed that infant remains had been found in her home, she admitted to one birth, claiming the baby was stillborn. In a recorded interview, Erica stated that she panicked after discovering the baby wasn't breathing and placed the body in a closet. Hours later, in a second interrogation, detectives informed her that two more sets of remains had been found. Initially, she maintained that these babies had also been stillborn, but under pressure, she confessed that one of them, a baby girl, had lived for about a week before passing away. Erica explained that she had found the baby unresponsive and blue. When asked why she didn't call for emergency help or attempt to revive the child, she replied that she had been paralyzed by fear. Erica revealed that she had delivered these babies in secret, using the bathtub while her family slept. She admitted feeling trapped and unable to escape her situation. She feared that Raymond, her partner, would leave her if he discovered the pregnancies and births, leading her to keep each one a secret. This fear underscored her inability to seek help or face the reality of her actions. DNA analysis confirmed that all 7 children were Erica and Raymond's. Both were arrested. Raymond, visibly distraught, claimed he had no idea that the 2 young girls were his daughters or that 3 infants had died and been hidden in the house. However, police struggled to reconcile his claims of ignorance. They found it nearly impossible to believe that Raymond, who shared a bedroom with Erica, could have been unaware of her pregnancies. Furthermore, they questioned how he could not have noticed the presence of the 2 young girls in their home until Erica supposedly revealed she was caring for them. Despite these suspicions, authorities lacked sufficient evidence to prove Raymond's full awareness of the situation. Initially, he was charged only with drug-related offenses after investigators found a marijuana-growing operation in the basement. Erica, however, faced a slew of charges, including second-degree murder, concealing a death, assault and battery on a child causing significant injury, reckless endangerment of a child, and 2 counts of animal cruelty related to a dog and a cat removed from the property. As the grim details of the House of Horrors, as it came to be known, emerged, Erica's neighbors began sharing their own observations. One neighbor recalled a foul odor emanating from the house but dismissed it at the time. Another regretted not reporting seeing a dog tied up with a very short leash in the yard. A postal worker mentioned that the house always appeared unkempt, and that the children often ate breakfast in the garage. A former acquaintance from Erica's childhood expressed disbelief, saying she had known Erica to regularly visit her mother with her two older children but had never seen any other children. At Erica's workplace, where she sold handmade crafts and candles, colleagues reported that she had quit just 2 weeks before the chilling discoveries were made. Meanwhile, one of Raymond's co-workers revealed that Raymond had confided about hygiene and financial problems at home. The co-worker also noted that Raymond often retreated to the basement to cultivate and use marijuana. At work, Raymond maintained a clean appearance, wearing dry-cleaned clothes and keeping a tidy desk adorned with photos of Erica and their two older children. The co-worker remarked that Raymond had once said he couldn't leave Erica despite their problems because he loved her and didn't want to hurt her. The Murray home was condemned and declared uninhabitable, overrun with flies, rats, feces, and piles of used diapers reaching nearly 3 feet high. Hazardous materials teams worked tirelessly to decontaminate the property while searching for additional remains, fearing further discoveries. The cleanup process, which included removing carpets, tearing down contaminated walls, and demolishing shelves, cost over $25,000, a bill that fell to Raymond's sister, who owned the house. Once investigators confirmed no additional remains were hidden, the property was demolished. The case left a lasting scar on the community, raising questions about how such horrific conditions could have persisted unnoticed for so long. In the days following the shocking discoveries, the Murray family's friends, relatives, and neighbors gathered for vigils outside the now demolished house. They left stuffed animals, balloons, and flowers as a tribute to the children. The community remained deeply shaken by the events, even as Erica Murray, 31 at the time, faced her first court hearing in December 2014. Erica pleaded not guilty to all charges. Although initially held without bail, the court set a $1 million bail during the trial, a relatively lenient decision given the gravity of the case. It wasn't until June 2019, 5 years later, that Erica's trial began. Throughout the proceedings, Erica showed little emotion, except when photographs of the infant's remains were displayed in court. Her defense team argued that the three deceased infants might have been stillborn, suggesting their deaths were not a result of Erica's negligence. The prosecution, however, maintained that Erica had abandoned and neglected her 5 youngest children, ultimately causing the deaths of 3 of them. Prosecutors presented Erica as a neglectful mother who forced her children to live in squalor among piles of trash, dead animals, dirty diapers, and other filth. They argued that at least one of the infants had been born alive and later died because Erica failed to seek medical attention. The court heard that after moving into the Blackstone home, Erica secretly gave birth to 5 more children, concealing each pregnancy under baggy clothing. Witness testimonies painted a harrowing picture of the conditions in the Murray home. Betsy Brown, the neighbor who discovered the horrors, took the stand to recount the filthy, chaotic environment she encountered. She described baby handprints smeared on walls, human waste, diapers filled with maggots, and the overwhelming stench of decay. Recordings of Erica's police interrogations were played in court. In the footage, she admitted that one of the infants had been born alive but died shortly after. She claimed she panicked and failed to call for help. Her defense attorneys argued that Erica's mental health issues impaired her ability to comprehend the severity of her actions. Forensic psychologists testified that Erica suffered from a personality disorder and had been emotionally abused by her partner, Raymond. They asserted that she genuinely believed she was doing her best as a mother despite the appalling conditions in which her children lived. The defense highlighted Raymond's controlling behavior, noting that he had adamantly opposed having more children for financial reasons, but took no measures to prevent pregnancies, leaving the responsibility entirely on Erica. They suggested that her untreated postpartum depression led her to hide her pregnancies and keep the infant secret, fearing Raymond's reaction if he found out. Prosecutors rejected the argument that Erica acted out of fear or mental illness. They accused her of living a life of secrecy and deception that resulted in the deaths of her children. They contended that Erica knew exactly what she was doing and had ample opportunities to seek help, but chose not to. The judge ultimately determined there was insufficient evidence to prove that some of the infants had been born alive. She noted that while the death of one of the infants was senseless and tragic, the prosecution failed to demonstrate that Erica had directly caused it. As a result, Erica was acquitted of second-degree murder and 2 counts of reckless endangerment of her older children, aged 13 and 10. However, she was found guilty on charges of animal cruelty and assault and battery related to the severe neglect of her 3-year-old and 5-month-old daughters. The judge acknowledged the extraordinary nature of the case, remarking that the victims, Erica's own children, were the most vulnerable and defenseless. Despite the horrifying discoveries, the court could not impose the severe punishment many had hoped for, given the mitigating factors of Erica's mental health. In July 2019, Erica Murray, then 36 years old, was sentenced to 8 years in prison. By the time she received her sentence, she had already served nearly 5 years in custody, meaning she would need to serve an additional 2 to 3 years before being eligible for parole. Her parole conditions, which extended for 5 years, included mandatory mental health treatment and a prohibition on contact with children under 10 years old. 3 months later, on October 29, 2019, Raymond Rivera, 42, reached a plea agreement with prosecutors. He pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including assault and battery on a child causing substantial injury, 2 counts of reckless endangerment of a child, 2 counts of animal cruelty, and 1 count of possession with intent to distribute a Class D substance. Raymond's attorney had previously filed a motion in August 2016 to dismiss the charges, arguing that he never had custody of the 2 neglected children found in the home. However, prosecutors countered, asserting that he was the father and bore responsibility for their welfare. The judge sentenced Raymond to 3.5 years for the assault charge, crediting him for the time he had already served. For reckless endangerment, he received a 4-year sentence in a correctional facility to run concurrently with his prior sentence, with an additional 136 days credited. Raymond was also sentenced to 3 years of probation for the remaining charges. His probation conditions included no unsupervised contact with children under 10, compliance with all service plans from the Department of Children and Families, and adherence to probate court orders. He was also required to undergo substance abuse evaluation and treatment, remain drug-free with random testing, and receive mental health treatment. Raymond's lawyer commented that his client had accepted more responsibility than he should have, given his position at the time, but Raymond wanted to resolve the case and move forward. The most recent information indicated that the couple's 2 oldest children, who were 13 and 10 at the time of the events, had been placed under the guardianship of Raymond's family. Erica Murray had been released from prison by the conclusion of this investigation. As for the 2 young, malnourished daughters found alive in squalid conditions, reports suggested they initially moved through several foster homes. The 3-year-old, referred to by authorities as Liza, made significant progress in her recovery. Conflicting reports about their current whereabouts suggest that, while some sources claim the girls remain in foster care, Others indicate they are living with their paternal grandparents and older siblings. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Every day, we see the darker side of the world around us. We witness how people can hurt others in ways that are hard to understand. It's a sad part of life, but it's something we can't ignore. As someone who dives into the world of crime, I'm here to share the most shocking stories and try to understand what drives people to do such things. I'm Michael, and today, I've got another unreal true crime story for you. Kapunda, South Australia, was a peaceful town where people felt safe. It wasn't the kind of place where shocking crimes happened. But on the night of November 7th, 2010, that all changed. Inside the Rowe family home, everything seemed normal. The lights were off, the house was quiet, and the family was fast asleep. But just after midnight, something terrifying happened. A scream cut through the silence. Then another. A struggle broke out, followed by chaos. Someone had entered the house, and within minutes, the Rowe family's home turned into a scene of horror. The next morning, everything looked the same from the outside. The house stood still. No one knew what had happened just hours before. Days would pass before neighbors started to worry, before anyone realized something was very, very wrong. What happened that night? Who was responsible? And why? The truth would send shockwaves through the entire town. In 2010, the quiet town of Kapunda, South Australia, was the kind of place where everyone knew their neighbors, and life moved at a slower, more peaceful pace. Among its residents was the Rowe family, who had built a simple yet happy life in the community. Andrew Rowe, the family's patriarch, was originally from England, born in 1965. At just 3 years old, his parents made the life-changing decision to move to Australia, where they settled in Adelaide. Growing up in the suburbs, Andrew was known for his warm personality and love for fishing trips with his father. His easygoing nature made him the kind of person people naturally gravitated toward. As a young man, Andrew met Rose, a vibrant and cheerful woman just a year younger than him. Their connection was instant, and before long they were inseparable. By 1985, they tied the knot in an intimate ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. A couple of years later, their joy multiplied with the arrival of their son Christopher in 1987, followed by their daughter, Chantel, in 1994. The Rowes decided to start a carpet cleaning business, which quickly became successful, providing them with financial stability. By 2010, Christopher had moved out and was living with his girlfriend a short distance away, while 16-year-old Chantel was balancing school and her part-time job at a local cafe. However, that year, Chantel faced an unexpected challenge. She discovered she was pregnant. Despite the difficulties ahead, she remained determined to build a future for her child, with her boyfriend Dylan offering unwavering support. Life in the Rowe household carried on as usual until the night of November 7th, 2010. What happened that night would send shockwaves through the town and leave investigators searching for answers in one of the most brutal crimes the region had ever seen. Sometime after midnight, an intruder broke into the Rowe home, carrying out a massacre so violent that even the most seasoned detectives from Adelaide were left shaken. The crime scene was a nightmare. Blood covered the floors, walls, and even the ceiling. Yet, it took 2 days before anyone realized something was terribly wrong. Concerned neighbors, noticing the eerie silence and lack of movement from the Rowe home, decided to check in. Peering through the windows, they stumbled upon a horrific sight. Inside, Andrew and Rose lay lifeless in the kitchen, their bodies unrecognizably mutilated. Chantel was found in her bedroom, the brutality of her murder even more disturbing. Each family member had suffered multiple stab wounds, their lives taken in a gruesome and merciless attack. Christopher, away on vacation in Queensland with his fiancée, first heard the whispers of a crime in his hometown through social media. Desperate for information, he scoured Facebook, hoping it wasn't his family involved. At first, he was reassured that his parents weren't the victims, but that false sense of relief was short-lived. When police finally contacted him, his worst fears were confirmed. The autopsy revealed chilling details. Andrew had been stabbed 29 times, Rose over 50, and Chantel 33 times. Even worse, Chantel had been assaulted before her murder, making the crime even more incomprehensible. Investigators initially turned their attention to Christopher, the only surviving member of the Rowe family. However, he was quickly ruled out. His frantic attempts to reach his family and solid alibi placed him thousands of miles away when the murders took place. With Christopher cleared, detectives faced an unsettling question. Who could have committed such a savage act? The Rowes had no known enemies. By all accounts, they were well liked and had never been involved in any conflicts. So why would someone target them so viciously? The case took an even darker turn when investigators discovered something truly unsettling. After the murders, the perpetrator had not fled in a panic. Instead, they took their time. Evidence suggested that the killer had changed into clean clothes and even lay down on Chantel's bed. Bloody drag marks showed that she had tried to hide, only to be pulled from her hiding spot. Robbery was ruled out as a motive. Nothing was taken. Valuables, including electronics and cash, were left untouched. The sheer violence of the crime suggested either a deeply personal grudge or the work of someone with a disturbingly cruel nature. Additionally, some parts of the crime scene appeared to have been wiped clean, indicating a failed attempt to cover up the evidence. Bloody footprints trailed toward the front door of the Rowe home, but then, abruptly, they stopped. It was as if the killer had deliberately removed their shoes and walked out in socks, careful not to leave more evidence behind. But that wasn't the most unsettling discovery. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that the murderer was either someone the family knew and trusted or had found another way inside without drawing attention. As investigators examined the horrific crime scene, they discovered that while Andrew and Chantel suffered brutal fates, Rose had endured the most. She had been stabbed over 50 times, far more than the others. The reason? She had survived the initial attack. In a desperate bid for help, she managed to make a phone call before the killer realized she was still alive. But before she could escape, the murderer returned, stabbing her repeatedly until she was silenced forever. With this gruesome reality setting in, detectives turned their attention to potential suspects. Andrew and Rose had no enemies, no financial troubles, and no known disputes that could have led to such a brutal crime. That left only one possible motive: Chantel. At just 16, Chantel had been balancing school and a part-time job while preparing for the unexpected arrival of her baby. Her boyfriend, Dylan, had been by her side through it all. They had been together for a year, attending the same school, making plans for the future. Dylan, also 16, seemed an unlikely suspect, but police needed to be thorough. They questioned him, checked his alibi, and looked for any reason why someone might have wanted to hurt Chantel or her family. Dylan was cooperative from the start. Devastated, he spoke openly about his love for Chantel, their dreams of raising their child together, and how the news of her murder had shattered him. His alibi was solid. He had been attending his grandfather's anniversary in another city, with dozens of witnesses confirming his whereabouts. With Dylan ruled out, the case hit another frustrating dead end. Still, the police had one powerful advantage: the killer's DNA. Forensic teams had collected samples, including seminal fluid, which could lead straight to the murderer. But when they ran it through the national database, there was no match. Whoever had done this had no prior criminal record. Then another detail emerged. The murder weapons had come from the Rowe's own kitchen. That suggested the attack might not have been premeditated, but instead a sudden frenzied outburst. To make matters worse, the killer had taken the knives with him, erasing a crucial piece of evidence. The estimated time of death was placed between midnight and 2 a.m. A neighbor later admitted to hearing Rose scream for help around 1 a.m., followed by a loud thud. But thinking it was just a heated argument, they never called the police. With few clues and no clear suspects, investigators turned to the public, hoping for a breakthrough. Tips flooded in, but most were misleading: wild theories, hoaxes, and outright dead ends. Just when it seemed like the case was going nowhere, Dylan recalled something that made detectives stop in their tracks. The night before her murder, Chantel wasn't feeling well. She had a fever and called her boss to let them know she wouldn't be coming to work the next day. At exactly 5 a.m., Dylan sent her a text checking in on her. His message was read, but there was no reply. What he didn't realize at the time was that Chantel had already been dead for hours. Someone else had read his message, someone who was still inside the house. Then came the most chilling discovery yet. The killer had actually tried to respond to Dylan's message, but because Chantel's phone was out of credit, the message never went through. It had been a failed attempt to create the illusion that she was still alive. With this disturbing lead, detectives turned their focus toward Chantel's social circle, searching for anyone with a possible grudge. That's when they came across Jason Alexander Downey. At just 17 years old, Jason was part of the same school crowd as Dylan, but barely knew Chantel. At first, he seemed harmless: average height, thin, quiet. Detectives initially planned to ask him a few routine questions and move on. But as soon as the interview began, Jason's behavior raised red flags. Instead of answering simple questions, he grew tense and evasive. He rambled about how he hadn't been invited to Chantel's last party and how everyone else seemed to have a partner except him. Things that had nothing to do with the case. Then, unprompted, he suddenly blurted out that he had an alibi for the night of the murders, despite no one asking. The inconsistencies in his story were alarming. Investigators took his fingerprints and DNA for comparison. Jason complied without hesitation, his demeanor oddly calm, which briefly made them second-guess their suspicions. But then, they noticed something: a series of fresh cuts on his palms. When asked how he got them, Jason claimed they were from a machine shop accident. But the wounds were too clean, too precise, more consistent with someone gripping a knife. Forensic experts soon had their answer. The fingerprints on Chantel's bedroom door were an exact match to Jason's. Within 2 days, DNA results confirmed what everyone feared. Jason Downey was the killer. The assumption that the murderer had to be large and physically strong had been wrong. Jason, thin and unassuming, had managed to overpower three people in a fit of unthinkable rage. Even more disturbingly, he had fooled nearly everyone. He even attended the Rose Memorial, placing flowers and pretending to grieve alongside their loved ones. Born in Scotland, Jason had moved to Kapunda with his mother and older brother. On the surface, his life seemed ordinary, but underneath, something much darker was lurking. As it turned out, Chantel had never been particularly close to Jason. She had been polite, but indifferent. She didn't dislike him, but she didn't particularly like him either. To her, he was just another person in the group. But for Jason, that indifference festered into something much more sinister. He had made advances toward Chantel in the past, only to be rejected. When he found out she was pregnant with Dylan's child, it set off something dangerous inside him, and that's when he made his decision. The fact that Dylan was the father of Chantel's baby, and not him, sent Jason into a jealous rage. But it wasn't just about Dylan. Jason's obsession had spiraled out of control, and on the night of November 7th, his emotions reached a breaking point. What happened next would leave an irreversible mark on Kapunda. When police first questioned Jason after his arrest, his unsettling calmness shocked the detectives. He denied any involvement, speaking with eerie confidence as if he could talk his way out of the mounting evidence against him. His fingerprints at the Rowe home? He claimed they were from a visit weeks earlier. But that wasn't the only lie. Forensic analysis revealed that Jason's DNA was found on Chantel's body. When confronted, he spun an outlandish story, insisting that he and Chantel had been intimate during his last visit. But the science didn't lie. DNA cannot remain viable on a body for weeks. It had to be fresh. His alibi crumbled. As the interrogation continued, Jason finally cracked, revealing a disturbing sequence of events that painted the true picture of that fateful night. Earlier in the evening, he had gotten into a heated argument with his mother and stepfather. Frustrated and angry, he chose to sleep in his car. But then, he learned from Dylan that Chantel was home, sick, vulnerable. And in that moment, his fixation on her took a darker turn. What started as a plan to simply drive by her house escalated into something far more sinister. He parked his car at the end of the street, hidden from view, and made his way toward the Rowe home. The house was dark, silent, but one window, the bathroom window, was slightly open. Thin and agile, Jason squeezed through the small opening with ease. Once inside, he sat in the bathroom for nearly half an hour, listening, making sure the house was completely still. He later claimed his only intention was to confess his feelings to Chantel. But if that were true, why did he take a kitchen knife before entering her bedroom? Investigators saw through the lie immediately. Jason hadn't come to pour out his heart, he had come to control her. The moment he stepped into Chantel's room, she knew something was wrong. She resisted him, and that resistance sent him over the edge. Overcome with rage, Jason lost all restraint. He grabbed the knife and stabbed her repeatedly, unleashing his fury in a frenzied attack. The commotion woke her parents, Andrew and Rose, who rushed to their daughter's aid. But Jason, now fully consumed by violence, turned the knife on them too, killing them both in a savage assault. Afterward, Jason tried to justify his actions as a crime of passion, but the evidence suggested something much darker: premeditation. More damning clues surfaced as police continued their investigation. A pair of blood-stained shoes was found abandoned in an isolated area. The DNA on them was a perfect match to all three victims. The prints from the soles matched the bloody footprints at the scene. Inside the shoes, Jason's sweat was found, further implicating him. though Jason cooperated at times, offering to show detectives where he had discarded the murder weapons. They were never recovered. Police suspected he was still trying to manipulate the case, stalling for time, even as the evidence against him mounted. By the fall of 2011, nearly a year after the murders, Jason Downey stood trial. Throughout the proceedings, he remained eerily emotionless, shifting his testimony multiple times but never showing true remorse. He claimed to have no memory of killing the Rowe family, despite the overwhelming forensic proof that he had. One particularly disturbing detail emerged during the trial. After the murders, Jason had taken Chantel's pendant and chain. He kept it as a twisted trophy, a physical reminder of the girl who had rejected him. At one point, he even argued that all of this could have been avoided if Chantel had just invited him to a party she had hosted before her death. It was clear that his deep feelings of rejection had fueled his monstrous actions. Throughout the trial, Jason remained cold and detached. When he finally pleaded guilty, it wasn't out of remorse. It was a calculated move to secure a lighter sentence. He later admitted to his brother that his guilty plea was a strategic decision to avoid a harsher punishment. Even law enforcement officers who had seen the worst of humanity were horrified by the sheer brutality of Jason's crimes. One investigator summed it up: his guilty plea shouldn't be seen as any sign of remorse. These murders were cruel, calculated, and savage beyond belief. On April 19, 2012, Jason Downey was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 35 years. Had he not pleaded guilty, he would have faced at least 45 years before being eligible for parole. In a final act of manipulation, Jason wrote a letter to Chantel's family and friends, claiming he was sorry and that he deserved his punishment. But reading between the lines, it felt hollow, forced, like a child being told to apologize rather than a man who truly regretted his actions. For Christopher Rowe, who lost his entire family in one night, the sentence could never bring back what was taken. To honor them, he had their names tattooed on his body, a permanent tribute to the parents and sister he would never see again. In one emotional interview, Christopher couldn't even bring himself to speak, instead letting his cousin express the pain that would never fade. The lives of my dad, mom, and sister were viciously taken, and yet their killer will have a chance at freedom one day, while we, their family, continue to serve a life sentence of grief. After the tragedy, Christopher took time away from work, leaving Kapunda to escape the painful memories. When he returned, he found it difficult to resume his old life. Eventually, he took over his father's business, renaming it from First Choice Carpet Cleaning to Rose Choice Carpet Cleaning, a way to honor his mother's memory while rebuilding his future. As for Jason Downey, he remains behind bars in the Moorland Juvenile Detention Center in South Australia, serving his sentence. Now, I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Jason's sentence was fair? Should he have received a harsher punishment? Or does spending decades in prison, knowing he'll never truly be free, serve as the most fitting consequence? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Every day, we see the darker side of the world around us. We witness how people can hurt others in ways that are hard to understand. It's a sad part of life, but it's something we can't ignore. As someone who dives into the world of crime, I'm here to share the most shocking stories and try to understand what drives people to do such things. I'm Michael, and today, I've got another unreal true crime story for you. It was late, almost midnight. Most little kids would be fast asleep, but inside a quiet apartment, a toddler's screams echoed through the walls. His cries were sharp and full of pain. In the kitchen, a pot of boiling water sat on the stove. A man rushed to grab his phone, dialing 911. His voice was shaky as he told the operator it was an accident. He said the little boy had been behind him and somehow the hot water spilled. But when paramedics arrived, something didn't add up. The child's burns were too serious, too widespread. The more police looked around, the more questions they had. If this was an accident, why did everything about it feel so wrong? Jabrailon Babels, known affectionately as Bam Bam or Bamster, was born on July 3, 2009 to parents Byron Babels and Jasmine Thompson in Dallas, Texas. Jasmine, originally from Arkansas, was only 19 years old at the time, while Byron was 37. Jabrailon had an older brother, just a year and a half ahead of him, and a large extended family. From an early age, he was a bright and talkative little boy, known for his infectious smile, dark brown eyes, and black hair. Unfortunately, Jabrailon's early years were marked by instability. His father, Byron, was incarcerated for felony forgery not long after his birth. While Byron was behind bars, Jasmine moved on and started a relationship with 37-year-old Carl Nalus Delaney Simmons. Carl Nalus was no stranger to the criminal justice system. He had a violent past that included a 1994 homicide conviction. He had been involved in a deadly altercation outside a South Dallas bar, which led to a 15-year prison sentence for both the killing and additional drug charges. Released in 2007, he quickly found himself back in legal trouble, getting arrested 2 years later for selling vials of PCP at $15 each. Byron was eventually released on parole in September 2010 and tried to reconnect with his children. However, Jabrailon and his older brother lived primarily with Jasmine, who had moved in with Carl Nelis. Despite knowing about Carl Nelis's criminal history, Jasmine downplayed it, brushing off concerns about his past and trusting him with her children. She frequently left them under his care while she went to work, believing he treated them like his own. By November 2010, the family had settled into a new apartment at 8110 Skillman Street in the Lake Highlands area of Dallas. Jasmine continued to leave her boys in Carl Nelis's care, unaware of, or perhaps choosing to ignore, the potential danger. On November 4, 2010, while Jasmine sought medical treatment at a hospital for a urinary tract infection, she left her sons in the care of Carl Nelis. That night, at 11:49 p.m., Carl Nelis made a frantic call to 911, reporting that Jabrailon had been severely burned. He claimed he had been heating water on the stove and hadn't realized the toddler was behind him. According to his account, when he turned, the boiling water accidentally spilled onto the child. During the call, Jasmine arrived home and, along with friends, tried to assist Jabrailon while Carl Nelis followed the dispatcher's instructions. Paramedics from Dallas Fire Rescue quickly responded and rushed Jabrailon to Parkland Memorial Hospital. Doctors found third-degree burns covering nearly 30% of his body. His legs, buttocks, right hand, and wrist were severely burned. Additionally, there were noticeable bruises on the left side of his face. Police officers arrived at the hospital at 12:10 a.m. to investigate. Carl Nellis provided them with his version of events, stating that he had been holding a pot of boiling water when Jabrailon suddenly ran up to him. In a moment of panic, he said, he dropped the pot, causing the water to splash onto the toddler. Jasmine corroborated that she wasn't home at the time and only learned of the incident through Carl Nelis's phone call. However, medical professionals raised concerns. The severity and pattern of Jabrailon's burns didn't align with Carl Nelis's explanation of a simple accidental spill. Officers noted inconsistencies in his story and decided to dig deeper. Jasmine and Carl Nelis consented to a search of their apartment, and authorities took Carl Nelis to Dallas Police Headquarters for further questioning. Jasmine later recalled that Carl Nelis often cooked for the family, and when she returned home that night, the kitchen appeared as if he had been preparing a meal. But something was off. There was no sign of a recent spill, and investigators were left questioning what had really happened to Jabrailon that tragic night. The morning after the tragic incident, police returned to the apartment to document the scene. Photographs revealed a box of hamburger helper left out and a package of pork chops sitting on top of the refrigerator. A towel lay on the floor near the stove, and a large pot containing a small amount of water remained on the stovetop. But the kitchen wasn't the only area of interest. As officers searched the apartment, they uncovered a significant amount of illegal substances. Inside a cabinet above the stove, they found 8 plastic baggies filled with cocaine. The refrigerator contained 95 small brown vials filled with liquid PCP. Along with the drugs, authorities seized a variety of other items, including 27 bottles of flavored vodka, 16 additional bottles of vodka, 17 cigarette lighters, 3 condoms, 4 empty cigar boxes, 43 cigars, a box of cut-up cigarettes, and a stash of cash hidden in the cabinets. Carl Nellis himself was carrying over $1,000 in cash in his pocket, which officers secured as evidence along with the other items. The following morning, on November 5th, the Dallas Police Child Abuse Unit took Carl Nelis into custody. He was charged with injury to a child, a first-degree felony. Detectives, alongside Child Protective Services, launched a deeper investigation into the case. Meanwhile, Jabrailon's older brother, who had been unharmed during the incident, was placed in the care of his grandmother. As for Jabrailon, he remained in the burn unit at Parkland Memorial Hospital, fighting for his life. His condition was initially not disclosed to the public, but given the extent of his injuries, it was clear he was in critical condition. Jasmine was not considered a suspect, as she had not been home at the time. She repeated what Carl Nelis had told her, that a pot of boiling water had accidentally spilled on her son. However, police and medical professionals were adamant that Jabrailon's injuries were not consistent with an accidental spill. "They told me it looked like he had been dipped in water," Jasmine recalled. "The doctors told me the same. I'm still searching for the truth." Why she continued to trust Carl Nelis, a man with a violent past and a known drug dealer, over the police and medical experts remains a question that may never be fully answered. For 5 excruciating weeks, little Jabrailon fought to stay alive. His tiny body was hooked up to countless tubes, a ventilator helping him breathe. In hospital photos, he was nearly unrecognizable, buried under wires and medical equipment designed to keep him alive. Despite doctors' best efforts, his condition worsened. In one of the many surgeries performed in an attempt to save him, doctors were forced to remove about 60% of his intestines due to severe damage. A second surgery took even more. Throughout his hospital stay, his fragile body was racked with infections. His kidneys failed, and swelling distorted his once bright, smiling face. The battle finally became too much. On the evening of Saturday, December 11th, at 8:53 p.m., Jabrailon succumbed to his injuries at Children's Medical Center, Dallas. He had endured 36 days of unimaginable suffering since the night he was burned. Some trauma is simply too overwhelming for the human body to endure, especially for a child barely past his first birthday. As news of Jabrailon's death spread, the case gained widespread attention. Authorities declared that what had happened to him was no accident. The man accused of causing his fatal injuries, his mother's boyfriend, Carl Nellis, was now facing even more severe legal consequences. In an exclusive interview with News 8 and the Dallas Morning News, Jasmine spoke about her son's suffering. "For more than 5 weeks my baby fought for his life," she said. "No child should have to go through something like this." With tears in her eyes, she added, "I wish it was me lying in that hospital bed instead of him." But while Jasmine still searched for answers, the police had already made up their minds. To them, there was no doubt this was not a tragic accident. It was a horrific act of violence, and they were determined to hold the person responsible accountable. In June 2013, Carl Nellis filed an appeal challenging his conviction. It was through the documents from the Court of Appeals that the full extent of Jabrailon's injuries was revealed in chilling detail. When he was admitted to the hospital, doctors found severe burns covering his legs, stretching all the way up to his waist. The most intense burns were located below his knees. Additional burn marks were discovered on the back of both his eyes, around his groin, on his right buttock, the bottoms of both feet, and his right hand. A smaller burn encircled part of his waist. However, there were no burns on his head, face, or shoulders. Disturbingly, bruises were found on his left cheek and around his left ear. Perhaps the most harrowing discovery was that the burns appeared to be hours old by the time Jabrailon arrived at the hospital. This revelation cast an even darker shadow over the timeline of events. Carl Nellis had called 911 at 11:49 p.m., nearly midnight, not exactly the time one would expect someone to be preparing hamburger helper and pork chops for 2 small children. 3 doctors who had treated Jabrailon testified for the prosecution. 2 of them were board-certified pediatric specialists in child abuse medicine. All 3 provided the same conclusion: Jabrailon's injuries were not accidental. They testified that the burn patterns were consistent with forced immersion in scalding liquid. According to their assessment, the little boy had likely been submerged in hot liquid while wearing a diaper. The heat had caused the diaper to leak, which explained the burns on his right buttock. One heartbreaking detail stood out among their findings. Jabrailon had instinctively curled into the fetal position in an effort to protect himself from the excruciating pain. The medical examiner who later conducted the toddler's autopsy supported the doctor's conclusion, reaffirming that the injuries were consistent with intentional harm rather than an accident. Despite this overwhelming medical evidence, the defense brought in a pediatrician who had never treated Jabrailon but had reviewed case documents. This doctor claimed that the burns could have been caused by splattering water rather than forced immersion. As part of the appeal, Carl Nellis's attorneys argued that because he was in the middle of cooking a meal and had attempted to assist Jabrailon after the incident, no rational jury could have found that he had intentionally harmed the child. They also claimed that Carl Nellis had simply reacted instinctively when startled by Jabrailon approaching from behind in the kitchen. However, the appeals court pointed out a glaring omission in Carl Nellis's 911 call. At no point did he provide an explanation for how the boiling water had come into contact with Jabrailon. Instead, he vaguely stated that he had been boiling water, that he had not seen the toddler behind him, and that, somehow, Jabrailon had been burned so severely that his skin was peeling off. The appeals court found Cornelius's version of events just as unconvincing as the original jury had. The court upheld the trial court's decision, denying his appeal. Cornelius Delaney Simmons remains incarcerated at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, housed in the Jim Ferguson Unit in Midway, Texas. He will not be eligible for parole until 2040. A wake for Jabrailon Babels was held at 6 p.m. on Thursday, December 16th, at the Golden Gate Funeral Home. His funeral followed the next day. Beyond that, there were no widely documented memorials or vigils held in his honor. Jabrailon was laid to rest beneath a simple granite headstone engraved with his full name, Jabrailon Babels, July 3, 2009, December 11, 2010. Below his name, a tender inscription reads, "There are no tears in heaven." Along the bottom of the stone, a small etching of a train with a teddy bear adds a gentle, childlike touch to his final resting place. Earlier last year, his family visited his grave in honor of what would have been his 15th birthday. They cleaned his headstone, adorning it with flowers and balloons as they remembered their beloved Bomb Bomb. Jabrailon's life was taken before he had the chance to grow beyond infancy. He never got to celebrate his second birthday, never had a first day of kindergarten, never experienced the joy of losing his first tooth or the excitement of riding a school bus for the first time. Every milestone that should have been ahead of him was stolen, though he never had the opportunity to leave his mark on the world in life. Telling his story ensures that Jabrailon's memory will endure. May his name live on, not just as a reminder of the injustice he suffered, but as a call to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Every day, we see the darker side of the world around us. We witness how people can hurt others in ways that are hard to understand. It's a sad part of life, but it's something we can't ignore. As someone who dives into the world of crime, I'm here to share the most shocking stories and try to understand what drives people to do such things. I'm Michael, and today, I've got another unreal true crime story for you. The night was quiet, but inside one apartment, something terrible was happening. The walls would hold a dark secret, a crime so horrifying that it would take months for the truth to surface. Shannon Graves had no idea that this night would be her last. At first, no one realized she was missing. Days turned into weeks, and life went on as usual, except for those who knew her best. They sensed something was wrong. Where had Shannon gone? Why wasn't she answering her phone? The more they searched for answers, the more unsettling the truth became. It wasn't just a disappearance. It was something far worse. A story of lies, jealousy, and a desperate attempt to erase someone from existence. But justice has a way of catching up, and soon the shocking truth would begin to unravel. Shannon Graves was born on November 4, 1988, in Ohio, USA. She was the daughter of Christine Graves, a single mother who later rebuilt her life with a man named Ronnie. From that point on, Ronnie took on the role of Shannon's father, treating her as if she were his own biological child. Shannon, in turn, made it easy for him. Anyone who knew her could see that she had a kind soul and a heart full of love. In 2016, Shannon earned her cosmetology license, a milestone she was thrilled about. To her, it wasn't just a career opportunity, it also symbolized a fresh start after a challenging youth. Her friends affectionately called her Star, and she stood out for her free spirit, honesty, and selflessness. However, her compassionate nature often led her to make unfortunate choices, particularly when it came to relationships and substance use, issues that worsened after the passing of her mother. Some of her closest friends noted that she had a tendency to fall for the wrong men, whether it was due to bad luck or an irresistible attraction to rebellious types. Despite these struggles, Shannon was determined to take charge of her life. With her hard-earned professional achievement, she felt ready to leave the past behind and focus on a brighter future. Those who knew her well, including Ronnie and her friends, could attest to her resilience and strength. Unfortunately, her instincts betrayed her when she became involved with Arturo Novoa. Arturo, originally from Puerto Rico, was charismatic and had a passion for music, but he was also extremely private about his personal life. That secrecy likely stemmed from his extensive criminal record, which dated back to 2004 when he was arrested for assault and property damage. Months later, he faced charges for escaping prison and obstructing official duties. By 2006, he was charged with felony fleeing after a police chase, followed by an aggravated arson charge later that year. After serving time, he was again arrested in 2008 for trespassing after being evicted from his residence. In 2010, he faced weapons and unlawful entry charges. Court records painted a picture of a man deeply entrenched in criminal activity, making ends meet through illegal means. When Shannon and Arturo started dating in the summer of 2016, things seemed to go well. She eventually introduced him to her loved ones, and she spent more and more time at his place. That same year, she welcomed a puppy into her life, a source of joy and companionship. During the holiday season, Shannon gathered with her family for a celebration filled with food, laughter, and gift exchanges. No one could have imagined that it would be the last time they would all be together. 2 months later, Shannon ran into her sister Debbie DePaul while with Arturo. Their conversation was brief, but they mentioned Debbie's upcoming birthday in March, for which Shannon had already begun planning. However, when the day arrived, Shannon never showed up, a surprising and uncharacteristic absence. At first, her family assumed she was simply busy and would join them later, but she never did. Even more concerning, she didn't call or send a message, not even to wish Debbie a happy birthday. When she also missed the Easter gathering the following month, alarm bells started ringing. As the weeks passed, her family's worry deepened. Repeated calls and messages went unanswered. Finally, Ronnie reached out to Arturo, who claimed that he and Shannon had broken up and that she had moved to Cleveland to be with someone else. However, when Ronnie and Debbie tried to contact her directly, they had no luck. Determined to find answers, they went to Shannon's apartment hoping for clues. What they found only raised more concerns. Her car and phone were still there, but there was no sign of her beloved dog. Meanwhile, around the same time, Arturo was arrested for drug-related charges. Shannon's family spent the following weeks consumed by fear and uncertainty. Then, in June, Debbie officially reported her disappearance to the police. In their report, family members acknowledged Shannon's past struggles with addiction, but emphasized that she had never gone this long without contacting them. Authorities urged anyone with information to come forward while they conducted their own investigation, searching through hospitals and jails, but there was no trace of Shannon anywhere. Tracking Shannon's whereabouts proved to be an incredibly difficult task for investigators, given that she had been missing for months. Still, they filed a request for her phone records while simultaneously delving into her personal life. Shannon's family mentioned that she often spent extended periods with her boyfriend before disappearing, prompting the police to speak with Arturo. However, he repeated the same story he had told Ronnie, adding another layer of complexity to the case. Without a concrete timeline for her disappearance, there was no way to verify Arturo's alibi. Moreover, there was no trace of the supposed new boyfriend Shannon had allegedly moved in with. As suspicions grew, detectives learned about an ex-boyfriend named John. Intrigued by the possibility of a lead, they decided to investigate him further. Besides running his own business, John had a criminal history tied to drug trafficking. In fact, his incarceration had been the catalyst for his breakup with Shannon, as her friends recalled the profound distress and disappointment she experienced upon learning of his conviction. To complicate matters, John had been released from prison shortly before Shannon was believed to have gone missing. When police located and interviewed him, he stated that he hadn't seen her since February, when she had mentioned rekindling her relationship with Arturo. His statement implied that things between Shannon and Arturo weren't as ideal as they seemed. Nevertheless, John admitted that he still had feelings for her at the time of that conversation. With two potential suspects but no solid evidence, the police needed a breakthrough. When Shannon's phone records finally arrived, investigators hoped they would provide a clear direction. However, they yielded little information, other than confirming that she had gone to work as usual in late February before her phone was abruptly turned off. The number had since been reassigned to someone else. Around the same time, all activity on her credit cards also ceased. The case remained at a frustrating dead end. Little did the investigators know, answers were coming, though in the most horrifying way imaginable. On July 30th, a man from the city of Youngstown called 911 to report a gruesome discovery. Over the phone, he revealed that human remains had been found inside black garbage bags, and, most disturbingly, the head was missing. Emergency responders immediately notified the police, who arrived at the home of the caller, a man named Kenny, and his wife, Jill. While forensic experts examined the remains, the couple was taken in for questioning. According to their accounts, the freezer containing the body parts belonged to a friend who had recently lost electricity in his home. A week earlier, he had asked them to store it in their basement, claiming it was filled with meat he didn't want to spoil. On July 29th, Jill decided to prepare spaghetti and meatballs for dinner. Assuming she could borrow some meat and replace it later, she went to the freezer, only to find it locked. She thought little of it. After all, their friend had always been a bit eccentric. Undeterred, she grabbed a screwdriver, removed the screws, and easily pried open the lock. But instead of the expected variety of frozen meat, she was met with piles of black garbage bags in a bucket, all exuding a putrid stench. A terrible feeling washed over her. She slammed the freezer shut and called her husband. When Kenny arrived, they cautiously opened one of the bags, making a shocking discovery: a severed human foot. Given that Kenny and Jill were questioned separately and their stories aligned perfectly, they were quickly cleared of suspicion. Instead, investigators turned their focus to the man who had left the freezer in their home. His name was Anthony Gonzalez. Kenny recounted meeting Anthony 4 years earlier through a mutual friend. They bonded over a shared interest in music. Anthony had audio equipment and had mentioned his desire to record rap songs. Although they occasionally hung out, Gene never considered him a close friend. He noted that Anthony was unpredictable and at times even aggressive. Despite the couple's cooperation, the true identity of the victim remained unknown. That changed when forensic experts examining the remains found a crucial clue: a scorpion tattoo on one of the feet. It matched the tattoo Shannon had on her foot, a reference to her zodiac sign. While further tests were necessary, it became increasingly clear that the body belonged to Shannon. Now, the investigators faced a daunting question. How and when had she ended up in that freezer? Shortly after, Ohio's lead prosecutor held a press conference to address the chilling case, which was quickly shaping up to be one of the most disturbing in recent history. Although the medical examiner couldn't determine the exact cause of death without the victim's head, Shannon's identity was confirmed through fingerprint analysis. Her family was devastated upon learning the fate of their beloved daughter and sister. Months after her disappearance, the grim reality was far worse than anything they had imagined. Despite their overwhelming grief, Shannon's loved ones came together to honor her memory with a candlelight vigil in a beautiful local park. Speaking to reporters, Debbie expressed her belief that Shannon's soul had found peace and that the event was meant to celebrate her life rather than dwell on sorrow. That evening, dozens of attendees lit candles and released lanterns into the sky, many of them wearing shirts with messages dedicated to Shannon. A close friend vowed to carry Shannon's spirit forward, refusing to let tragedy define her legacy. Although her family shared that sentiment, they could not hide their pain. Ronnie, too heartbroken to appear on camera, confided that his grief was indescribable. He had loved Shannon as his own daughter and now longed for justice. Meanwhile, investigators intensified their search for Anthony. It wasn't long before they uncovered a critical piece of information. Anthony Gonzalez was merely an alias. His true identity was someone they had already considered a suspect. As the investigation into Shannon's disappearance continued, new revelations surfaced rapidly. Authorities discovered that Arturo had been in a relationship with a woman named Katrina Layton, who moved into his home just 2 weeks after Shannon was last seen alive. Given Arturo's extensive criminal record, police wasted no time in pursuing him. Both he and Katrina were arrested, and their residence was thoroughly searched. Investigators found red stains on the walls, a knife, and a manual for the freezer where Shannon's remains had been discovered. Kenny, who had previously thought his friend's name was Anthony, was shocked to learn Arturo's real identity. He wasn't alone in his confusion, as Arturo frequently used aliases, possibly to conceal his past, which included activities linked to illicit substances. During questioning, Arturo remained calm and repeatedly denied any involvement in Shannon's death, claiming he had no knowledge of her whereabouts. He also distanced himself from the freezer. Katrina echoed his statements, but their denials unraveled when police found a key among her belongings that fit the freezer's lock. This discovery directly connected them to the crime, ensuring they remained in custody as the investigation progressed. Meanwhile, John, Shannon's ex-boyfriend, played a crucial role in uncovering more details. Through conversations with Shannon's acquaintances, he learned about a bonfire gathering attended by Arturo. According to a witness, Arturo had used the fire to burn personal belongings. When asked, he claimed the items were Shannon's clothes, and he was destroying them as revenge for supposed infidelity. That night, he was joined by a friend named Andrew Herman, and together they continued burning clothing. Investigators searched the location and found remnants of the fire, including a bracelet that belonged to Shannon. As the case unfolded, they contacted a woman familiar with Andrew and his wife Michelle. She revealed that Arturo and Katrina were responsible for Shannon's murder, while Andrew assisted in dismembering the body. According to the witness, Katrina had long despised Shannon out of jealousy, and that resentment was mutual. The case took an even more disturbing turn when neighbors reported seeing Katrina walking Shannon's dog and using her credit cards for small purchases around the neighborhood. It appeared she had taken over aspects of Shannon's life. In the midst of these developments, Ronnie passed away unexpectedly, never seeing justice served. Debbie, overwhelmed with grief, sought therapy while taking care of her younger brother and Shannon's beloved dog. Meanwhile, both Andrew and Michelle were placed in pretrial detention. Authorities had strong evidence that Michelle had threatened witnesses in an effort to obstruct the investigation and cover up the crime. As the case was presented to a grand jury, a clearer version of the events emerged. On February 24, 2017, Arturo killed Shannon, most likely in the presence of Katrina. Later, he invited Andrew over, and upon his arrival, Arturo requested his help in dismembering the body. The trio attempted to dissolve parts of Shannon's remains in sulfuric acid, but did not have enough to complete the process. They disposed of her head while storing other body parts in the freezer. Some remains were discarded in an unknown location that authorities have yet to uncover. According to the lead prosecutor, Arturo was nothing more than a petty drug dealer driven by jealousy over Shannon's financial stability, while Katrina wanted her gone to claim Arturo for herself. Facing the possibility of the death penalty, the four defendants eventually accepted plea deals. Arturo Novoa was sentenced to life in prison for Shannon's murder. Katrina Layton received an 18-year sentence. Andrew Herman was sentenced to 12 years, and Michelle was given 2.5 years, followed by a 6-month substance abuse program. Arturo later attempted to appeal his sentence, but the original ruling was upheld. Determined to keep Shannon's memory alive, Debbie created a social media page dedicated to her sister, regularly posting photos of her beloved dog. She often visits Shannon's grave, where she has developed a meaningful ritual. After trimming the grass, she spray paints a large pink heart beside the headstone, Shannon's favorite color. In a local interview conducted a few years later, Debbie recalled the moment she received the heartbreaking call about the partial discovery of Shannon's remains. However, it wasn't until the global health crisis, when she lost her job and found herself isolated at home, that the full weight of the tragedy truly hit her. With no distractions, she was forced to process the immense loss. Despite the pain, she eventually found solace in allowing herself to grieve. Today, the investigators who helped bring Arturo to justice continue searching for the missing portions of Shannon's remains. Debbie remains hopeful that they will one day be found, while keeping her sister's memory alive through her dedicated online tribute. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Every day, we see the darker side of the world around us. We witness how people can hurt others in ways that are hard to understand. It's a sad part of life, but it's something we can't ignore. As someone who dives into the world of crime, I'm here to share the most shocking stories and try to understand what drives people to do such things. I'm Michael, and today, I've got another unreal true crime story for you. When police arrived at Michael Polding's apartment in Brighton, they noticed piles of unopened mail and an eerie silence. No one answered the door. Something felt off. When officers forced their way inside, they found a horrifying scene. In the basement, wrapped in sheets and left to rot, was Michael's body. He had been missing for nearly 2 months, and now the truth was finally coming to light. But how did he end up there? And where was Ricardo Pisano, the man who had been living with him? As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a disturbing story of trust, lies, and betrayal. Michael had opened his home and heart to someone he believed cared for him. Instead, he had been used, manipulated, and ultimately left to die. But what really happened in that apartment? And how did Ricardo manage to escape justice for so long? Ricardo Pisano was born in South Africa in 1977. His early life, much like his true identity, remains shrouded in mystery. Most of what is known about his past comes from his own interviews, but their accuracy is often questioned. While he insisted that Ricardo was not his real name, we will refer to him as such for clarity. Raised in a household that, like many in South Africa, struggled with poverty, Ricardo faced hardships from an early age. As he grew older, these challenges only intensified. In his teenage years, he met a young woman with whom he had a daughter. The responsibility of fatherhood pushed him to seek ways to provide for his new family. Accounts of his work history are vague, but there are strong indications that Ricardo became involved with drug trafficking gangs that controlled the streets of Cape Town. According to later statements, he claimed to have been threatened by a group known as Pagada, which emerged at the time as a vigilante movement aiming to combat crime through street justice. While some saw this organization as a force for good, law enforcement viewed it as a radical entity that took justice into its own hands. Feeling endangered by this group, Ricardo, then 23 years old, fled South Africa, leaving behind his wife and daughter. From that point on, his life became a series of struggles and deceptions, characterized by the use of false identities to evade the authorities. His journey led him to New Zealand, where he was soon arrested for extortion. Sentenced to 15 months in prison, he managed to escape after serving only 8 months by taking advantage of a prison event in 2001. Despite an intensive manhunt, he vanished without a trace. Resourceful and elusive, Ricardo made his way to Australia, where he lived under a different identity for about a year and a half before moving illegally to the United Kingdom in 2004. Once in the UK, with no legal status and no financial resources, he was forced to find ways to survive while staying under the radar. It was during this time that he crossed paths with two individuals who made a living through sex work. Seeing it as an easy way to make money, Ricardo joined them. Initially, he catered to female clients, but he soon realized that male clients were more willing to pay for discretion. One of these clients was Michael Polding, a 59-year-old man whom Ricardo met in December 2009 after Michael responded to an ad Ricardo had placed in a gay magazine offering escort services. Michael was born in Scotland in 1950 into a large and wealthy family, being one of 9 siblings. Though his childhood was a happy one, his teenage years became more difficult as he came to terms with his attraction to men, something his family and the conservative society around him did not accept. Seeking a life of greater freedom, Michael moved to London at the age of 20, settling in Croydon, South London, where he secured a stable job in the urology department of a hospital. His career provided him with financial security, and despite the distance, he maintained strong ties with his family in Scotland, who described him as kind and loving. As the years passed, Michael found happiness with his partner, Henry, with whom he shared his life until Henry's passing in 2001. This loss devastated him, leading to a deep depression. He turned to alcohol to cope, and as his health declined, exacerbated by osteoporosis, his relationships became fleeting. Nearing 60, loneliness weighed heavily on him, prompting him to seek the company of younger men. This search led him to Ricardo, in whom he hoped to find companionship. What began as a straightforward exchange, money for companionship, soon developed into something deeper, at least for Michael. Ricardo quickly realized Michael's loneliness and generosity and saw an opportunity to take advantage of it. Within months of meeting, Ricardo had moved into Michael's apartment. To explain his presence, he told different stories. Some believed he was Michael's caretaker due to health issues, while others were told he was his godson. In October 2011, after losing his job, Michael decided to relocate to Brighton, specifically to the Kemptown area, known for its vibrant LGBTQ community. He hoped that moving there would allow him to live more openly as a gay man. Using some of the proceeds from the sale of his former apartment, he paid a full year's rent up front for his new home, where Ricardo also moved in with him. The remainder of his savings he entrusted to his sister Mary for safekeeping. Aware of this financial cushion, Ricardo and his associates persuaded Michael to invest his savings in a beauty salon, a decision that would later have dire consequences. In an effort to oversee the supposed beauty salon business, one of Ricardo's associates temporarily moved into the apartment that Ricardo and Michael shared. However, from the very beginning, the venture was doomed to fail. By May 2012, Ricardo convinced Michael that they needed additional funds to keep the business afloat. Trusting him, Michael reached out to his sister and transferred several sums. First $600, then another $120, and finally, a larger sum of $1,900. After this last transaction, all communication between Michael and his family abruptly ceased. Concern quickly spread among his loved ones. It was highly uncharacteristic of Michael to ignore calls and emails, raising alarms. As weeks passed with no word from him, his sister officially reported his disappearance to Sussex police on July 16, 2012. When officers arrived at Michael's residence, they immediately noticed stacks of unopened mail piling up at the entrance, a telltale sign that something was wrong. Upon forcing entry, they made a grim discovery. Michael's body was found wrapped in bedsheets in the basement, already in an advanced state of decomposition. The autopsy revealed multiple injuries, including broken ribs and a fractured collarbone, prompting police to launch a full-scale homicide investigation. As detectives questioned neighbors, they learned that Michael had moved into the area with two younger men. Witnesses reported that the relationship between the three often seemed tense, sometimes even violent. Authorities attempted to locate both individuals. Ricardo's associate was found and taken into custody as a suspect, but was later released on bail due to a lack of concrete evidence. Ricardo, however, had disappeared without a trace. A key testimony came from Ricardo's supposed business partner. He recounted that on May 22, 2012, he had visited the apartment and found Michael in a severely weakened state. When he suggested calling an ambulance, Ricardo refused. This statement led investigators to a critical discovery. Michael had been hospitalized just weeks earlier with head injuries and fractured ribs. Piecing together the evidence, authorities determined that Michael had likely died sometime between May 23 and May 30, 2012, nearly 2 months before his body was found. This timeline reinforced the theory that Ricardo was the last person to see Michael alive, making him a prime suspect and intensifying the urgency to locate him. As the investigation deepened, police uncovered disturbing details about Ricardo's past. Though he had been close to Michael, their relationship was marked by manipulation, control, and escalating violence. To build a case against him, detectives compiled a psychological and behavioral profile highlighting his history of financial exploitation and the turbulent nature of his involvement with Michael. Given the seriousness of the case, Sussex police launched a major operation, Operation Diary, dedicating extensive resources to track him down. For over a year, Ricardo's face appeared across media outlets and crime watch programs. Authorities described him as approximately 35 years old, of slim build, with olive-toned skin. Reports suggested he was last seen in Brighton in mid-May and could have altered his appearance, possibly growing a beard or disguising himself. He was known for his South African accent and history of using false identities. As the case gained international attention, the search extended beyond the UK. Given his past ties to South Africa and New Zealand, multiple law enforcement agencies collaborated to locate him. Media outlets gave him various nicknames, while a South African newspaper dubbed him the cunning escapist. London tabloids branded him New Zealand's most wanted, as he was the only one of 55 fugitives in Waikato who had evaded capture in over a decade. To encourage public assistance, authorities offered a $6,000 reward for information leading to his arrest. Leads began trickling in. A crucial piece of evidence emerged from surveillance footage recorded in July 2012, showing Ricardo in a Southampton shopping center. This confirmed that he had not left the UK and was still actively evading authorities. Despite these clues, he remained elusive. The urgency to capture him intensified in April 2013 when forensic experts released the final autopsy results. The medical examiner ruled Michael's death a homicide, confirming that blunt force trauma to the chest was the cause. With this revelation, Ricardo was officially named the prime suspect, prompting law enforcement to ramp up their efforts. The manhunt finally ended on May 9, 2013, when Ricardo was located and arrested following an altercation at a residence in Southampton. Despite his attempts to conceal his identity, authorities confirmed his true background and took him into custody. Following his arrest, Ricardo was transferred to Brighton, where Sussex's major crime unit began their interrogations, determined to unravel the full story behind Michael's tragic death. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Ricardo maintained that he was not in the city at the time of the crime. In an emotional statement, Michael's family expressed both their anguish and relief, while knowing that the person believed to be responsible was behind bars provided some closure. They struggled to understand what had truly led to Michael's tragic end. Now, investigators turned their focus to uncovering the motive behind the crime. As detectives delved deeper, they confirmed that Ricardo and Michael's relationship had evolved into a toxic dynamic riddled with manipulation and abuse. From the start, Ricardo had relied entirely on Michael for financial support, claiming he had no job or income. Under the guise of being a caregiver, he gradually drained Michael's savings, taking advantage of his generosity. Along with two associates, Ricardo convinced Michael to invest nearly all his money into a business that failed almost immediately. With his bank account nearly empty, financial strain may have been the breaking point. Witnesses recalled seeing Michael in distress during the time frame in which his death was believed to have occurred. This discovery raised significant concerns. It suggested that Ricardo had intentionally denied Michael the care he needed, possibly sealing his fate. Further investigation uncovered a crucial contradiction in Ricardo's alibi. Phone records proved he had, in fact, been in Brighton at the time of Michael's death, despite his earlier claims. Additionally, police found messages he had sent shortly after Michael's body was discovered, in which he feigned concern over his absence. This appeared to be an attempt to establish an alibi and divert suspicion away from himself. With mounting evidence, Ricardo was officially charged with murder and grievous bodily harm. His trial began in September 2013. During the trial, prosecutors painted Ricardo as a master manipulator, a man who had built his life on deception, using false identities to evade justice. They argued that Michael, a vulnerable and trusting individual, had fallen victim to Ricardo's calculated schemes. The prosecution maintained that once Michael's financial resources were depleted, Ricardo saw no further use for him and callously ended his life, leaving his body to decay for weeks. The jury was also presented with evidence of Ricardo's actions after the crime. Following Michael's death, he had sent text messages in an apparent effort to create a false narrative, pretending to be concerned about his well-being. The prosecution asserted that this was a deliberate ploy to cover his tracks, motivated by his fear of being exposed, not just for the crime, but also due to his illegal immigration status. When it was Ricardo's turn to testify, he attempted to steer the focus elsewhere. He spoke at length about his past, detailing his reasons for fleeing South Africa and claiming that returning would put his life at risk. Though he reiterated that Ricardo was not his real name, he once again refused to disclose his true identity. Regarding Michael, Ricardo portrayed himself as a devoted companion who had shared an emotional bond with the older man. He claimed that Michael had been aware of his troubled past, even offering to marry him so that he could remain in the UK legally. He also insisted that Michael had financially supported him not out of manipulation, but out of genuine care, even providing money for him to send to his family abroad. When addressing the circumstances of Michael's death, Ricardo put forth an entirely different version of events. According to his testimony, on May 29, 2012, he had gone for a walk along the beach. Upon returning home, he claimed to have found Michael hanging from the staircase railing. In an emotional recounting, he described the moment as devastating, insisting that he had desperately tried to revive him but found no pulse. He explained that he had covered Michael's body with a towel and later wrapped him in a blanket, but, fearing the consequences of contacting the authorities due to his immigration status, he chose not to report the death. Ricardo admitted feeling guilty for not arranging a proper burial, but insisted that he had not caused Michael's death. Michael's family, however, rejected Ricardo's claims, stating that he had never exhibited any signs of suicidal thoughts or mental distress. The prosecution also dismantled Ricardo's version of events, citing forensic evidence that ruled out suicide. The autopsy report had confirmed that Michael died from blunt force trauma to the chest, not from asphyxiation. The jury deliberated on December 9, 2013, weighing Ricardo's role in the crime. After several hours of discussion, they reached a verdict. Ricardo Pisano, now 37 years old, was found not guilty of murder, but was convicted of manslaughter, grievous bodily harm, and preventing a lawful burial. 1 week later, on December 16, 2013, the court sentenced Ricardo to 18.5 years in prison. In his final remarks, the judge emphasized the disturbing nature of Ricardo's actions, describing Michael as a victim of sustained manipulation, financial exploitation, and ultimately, violence. He condemned Ricardo's callous treatment of the man who had supported him, stating that leaving Michael's body to decay only added to the cruelty of his crime. The lead prosecutor in the case fully supported the sentence, echoing the judge's condemnation of Ricardo's actions. He emphasized that what made the crime particularly heinous was not just the financial and emotional exploitation of Michael, but the utter disregard Ricardo showed for him in death, leaving his body to decay in his own home, abandoned and forgotten. For Michael's sister, Mary, the verdict brought a sense of justice, but it could never be enough to compensate for the horror of what had happened. She described Ricardo as a despicable and ruthless individual, incapable of remorse. Though relieved that he would spend years behind bars, she and her husband Sam felt a deep responsibility to speak out. They decided to share their experience publicly, hoping that their story might prevent others from falling into similar situations. Their message became a call to action, urging those in abusive relationships to seek help before it was too late. Mary stressed that no one should suffer in silence and encouraged people to reach out to their loved ones for support. She firmly believed that open conversations about abuse, no matter the age, gender, or circumstances of the victim, were crucial for both protection and healing. If their testimony could help even one person escape a dangerous situation, she said, then sharing their pain would have been worth it. This case shed light on the complexities of relationships where power imbalances and emotional dependence can create a dangerous dynamic. While Michael and Ricardo's relationship may have initially appeared consensual, the evidence showed how Ricardo systematically manipulated him, taking advantage of his loneliness and financial security. Michael's murder was an extreme but tragically predictable outcome of unchecked abuse, where greed and control ultimately led to a devastating loss of life. The investigation also confirmed that Michael had endured prior physical mistreatment, red flags that, in hindsight, should have been recognized and acted upon. His death underscored the urgent need for greater awareness and intervention in situations where vulnerable individuals, particularly the elderly, are at risk of exploitation. Losing his long-term partner and struggling with health issues had left Michael increasingly isolated, making him an easy target for someone like Ricardo, an opportunist with no regard for the well-being of others. Only through awareness, education, and proactive measures can similar tragedies be prevented. Michael's family hopes that by sharing his story, they can help spark conversations and inspire real change, ensuring that no one else falls victim to the same kind of betrayal and cruelty.
Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Every day, we see the darker side of the world around us. We witness how people can hurt others in ways that are hard to understand. It's a sad part of life, but it's something we can't ignore. As someone who dives into the world of crime, I'm here to share the most shocking stories and try to understand what drives people to do such things. I'm Michael, and today, I've got another unreal true crime story for you.
It was a cold, quiet night, but something terrifying was about to happen deep in the woods near Altrincham. A car pulled over on the empty road. The driver, a 19-year-old, stepped out looking around nervously. In the passenger seat was Alex, just 15, completely unaware that this night would change everything. What started as a secret between them had spiraled into something dangerous. Trust was broken, emotions were out of control, and within minutes, things would take a deadly turn. But how did it get to this point? And what really happened that night? Stay with me as we uncover the shocking truth behind this chilling case. The Rada family lived a peaceful life in the village of Tabley, nestled in Cheshire, a county in northeastern England. Their home was filled with warmth, shared by Lisa, her husband Adam, and their only child at the time, Adam Jr. For years they had dreamed of expanding their family, but it wasn't until nearly a decade later that their wish finally came true, an event Lisa described as nothing short of a miracle. On March 5, 2004, their second son, Alexander Rhoda, was born. From the start, he was affectionately called Alex. As he grew, Lisa noticed that Alex had unique interests that set him apart from other children. He loved playing with her makeup and handbags, showing a natural inclination towards things that were considered more delicate. At 13, Alex gathered the courage to share a deeply personal truth with his parents. He was gay. Lisa and Adam had long suspected this and welcomed his revelation with open arms, offering unwavering support. Adam, however, did feel concerned, not about Alex's identity, but about how society might treat him. Unfortunately, his fears weren't unfounded. At school, Alex faced taunts from certain classmates, particularly from boys who struggled to accept those who didn't conform to their expectations. Yet Alex remained composed. Unlike many his age, he never felt the need to hide who he was. At Holmes Chapel Secondary School, Alex built a close circle of friends, mostly girls. At least 8 of them were his best friends. They adored him and embraced him wholeheartedly. These friendships became his shield as his friends stood up for him whenever he faced unkind words. With their support, Alex thrived, refusing to let negativity weigh him down. Full of joy, confidence, and enthusiasm for life, Alex was known for his infectious laughter. A bright student, he was also deeply engaged with social media. He loved sharing moments of his life, singing, dancing, and laughing. One of his social media accounts had already amassed more than 4,000 followers. He and his father shared a uniquely close relationship, one that felt more like a friendship. By the time Alex turned 15, he had become incredibly popular, his phone constantly buzzing with messages from friends and admirers alike. But one particular message, received one evening, stood out from the rest. It was from Matthew Mason, an older boy whose online presence had always carried an air of mystery. Something about it made Alex pause. Matthew, from the nearby town of Ollerton, was 19 and the son of a farmer. He had grown up in an affluent and devout household with a sprawling estate worth millions. Every Sunday morning, his family faithfully attended church. In school, Matthew had been known for his calm demeanor, much like Alex. He had also attended Holmes Chapel Secondary before pursuing agricultural engineering. A member of the Young Farmers Organization, he worked part-time as an apprentice mechanic and spent his free time fishing with his father, with whom he was particularly close. At the time, Matthew was also in a relationship with a girl named Caitlin Lancashire. In October 2019, Alex confided in Georgia, one of his closest friends, about the messages he had been receiving from Matthew. Georgia was taken aback. She had known Matthew from school and had never noticed him showing the slightest interest in men, nor had he ever hinted at being bisexual. The situation felt odd, even unsettling. Their worlds were entirely different. Alex and Matthew had never run in the same social circles. Without social media, their paths might never have crossed. Georgia cautioned Alex to be careful, yet as the messages continued, Alex couldn't help but feel excited. He added Matthew as a friend on one of his social media pages, and soon, their conversations became more frequent. For Alex, this felt like the beginning of something special, his first experience with love. Alex had never been in a relationship before, and the experience felt exhilarating, like stepping into a completely new world. His friends were thrilled when they learned he was finally exploring deep emotions. At first, the exchanges between Alex and Matthew were harmless, just casual messages. But over time, their conversations became more flirtatious, turning into something more intimate. Matthew complimented Alex on his appearance, and soon they started sharing photos. One night, after having too many drinks at a bar, the 19-year-old made a reckless decision. He sent Alex an explicit photo of himself. According to Alex's friends, he had a habit of not fully grasping the seriousness of situations, often treating them as jokes. So, to some extent, he perceived it as part of a flirtatious game. However, things escalated when Matthew sent a video of himself in a compromising act. As their virtual relationship intensified, Matthew suggested they meet in person, offering to pick Alex up from his house. But Alex refused, explaining that his father wouldn't allow it. Still, they continued exchanging hundreds of messages. Curious to learn more about Matthew, Alex decided to dig deeper into his social media accounts. What he found left him feeling betrayed. Matthew was already in a relationship. The realization sparked a wave of frustration and distrust, making him question everything they had shared. Determined to confront the truth, Alex reached out to Matthew's girlfriend, Caitlin, the same girl featured in multiple posts on his social media. On November 3rd, the 15-year-old messaged Caitlin asking if she was dating Matthew. When she confirmed it, he dropped the bombshell, revealing that he had been involved with Matthew in a secret relationship for the past 2 to 3 weeks. Caitlin was left in shock. Alex didn't hold back. He detailed the explicit exchanges between him and Matthew, even mentioning a conversation where he had tried to set boundaries. He admitted that he had only discovered Matthew's relationship after following him. According to media reports, jealousy played a major role in Alex's actions. An hour after speaking with Caitlin, he confronted Matthew, telling him he had exposed the truth to his girlfriend. His anger and frustration were clear. He accused Matthew of deception, not only towards Caitlin but also towards him. "You have someone who loves you," Alex messaged, "so why did you need to talk to me at all?" He insisted that Matthew come clean because, after 2 years together, Caitlin deserved honesty. However, Alex had already taken it upon himself to reveal the truth. Matthew, coming from a deeply religious and traditional family, was terrified of his secrets being made public. His biggest fear was that Alex would expose him. Panicked, he spoke to Caitlin, denying the accusations and painting Alex as a liar. From that moment, the dynamic between Alex and Matthew took a disturbing turn. Feeling cornered, the 15-year-old threatened to leak the explicit photo he still had of Matthew. According to reports, later that same day, Matthew added Alex as a beneficiary to his bank account and transferred him just over $60. By then, Caitlin had already ended the relationship. Despite the tension between them, on November 9th, Alex and Matthew met in person for the first time and became physically involved. Over the following 2 weeks, their secret relationship continued, and although everything seemed fine on the surface, the payments didn't stop. Matthew wasn't ready for the truth to come out. But on December 12, 2019, everything reached a breaking point. After weeks of threats and pressure, Matthew snapped. That cold, rainy night, he picked Alex up from his house and drove him to a secluded forested area near Altrincum under the pretense of having another intimate encounter. But once they arrived, Matthew unleashed his rage, attacking Alex mercilessly with a wrench he had brought with him. After carrying out the brutal act, Matthew drove to a friend's farm, hoping to eliminate any evidence that could tie him to the crime. As part of his alibi, he then calmly made his way to 2 different bars, meeting up with friends for drinks as if nothing had happened. At one of the bars, he took a selfie and posted it on social media, further solidifying his pretense of a normal night out. Later, in an attempt to make his alibi even more convincing, he snapped a picture of himself lying in bed, smiling with his bare torso exposed. He later sent this image to Caitlin. Sometime during the night, he found Alex's phone lying on the passenger seat of his car. Knowing how much incriminating evidence was stored on the device, he quickly got rid of it. As the night deepened, Matthew made a chilling return to the forest. He dragged Alex's lifeless body to the side of the road and tried to lift him into his Renault Clio. But after several failed attempts, he gave up and left the body abandoned there, walking away without looking back. By this time, Alex's parents were growing increasingly anxious about his disappearance. After failing to reach him, they reported him missing, and soon, police, friends, and family members were desperately searching for him. At exactly 12:35 a.m., a Cheshire police officer sent Matthew a text message asking him to get in touch regarding his missing friend, Alex. It was Alex's mother who first voiced her suspicions about the 19-year-old. By morning, the grim reality unfolded. A group of garbage collectors made a gruesome discovery: Alex's half-naked body, severely disfigured from multiple blows. When law enforcement arrived at the crime scene in the forest, they were met with a horrifying sight. Alex had suffered at least 15 blows to the head in what authorities described as a savage and merciless attack. Matthew never anticipated being caught so quickly. However, a witness had unknowingly sealed his fate. The previous night, someone had taken a photo of a vehicle parked by the roadside. When police traced it back, they confirmed it belonged to Matthew. On December 13th, just before noon, officers arrested him on a nearby highway. Despite his attempt to wash away the evidence, dried blood was still visible on his hands. A search of his car's trunk uncovered a garbage bag containing damning evidence: a green sweater stained with blood, the very wrench used to attack Alex, and a large padded jacket that had belonged to the victim. With overwhelming evidence against him, Matthew was taken into custody and formally charged with the crime. Investigators pieced together the tragic trajectory of Alex and Matthew's relationship, revealing how it had started with intrigue and ended in unimaginable violence. Their digital exchanges had frequently revolved around money, leading to a final, fateful conversation just moments before Alex's brutal murder. Records showed that after the first payment, Matthew had sent Alex a total of $2,500, allegedly as payment for their encounters and to ensure his silence. The last transfer, amounting to $130, was made just 5 days before the crime. Adding another layer to the tragedy, it was revealed that shortly before his death, Alex had an unsettling encounter with Matthew's mother. She had unexpectedly walked in on them during an intimate moment. Disturbed by what had happened, Alex later messaged a friend, confiding his discomfort and even detailing the physical pain he felt after the incident. In a joking manner, his friend teased him, calling him a prostitute, to which Alex simply responded by repeatedly mentioning money. As the investigation deepened, chilling new details emerged. Matthew's internet search history exposed his dark thoughts. He had researched ways to end someone's life. Among his disturbing queries were, what happens if you push someone down the stairs? As well as searches on poisons and unsolved missing person cases in Cheshire. According to one of Alex's friends, when Matthew initially reached out to arrange their final meeting, Alex had been excited. However, after a second phone call, he began to feel uneasy. He even messaged his friend, asking if it seemed strange that the meetup was in a special secret place. By then, Alex had a gut feeling that something wasn't right. Despite his doubts, he eventually agreed to go, most likely because he needed the money. Moments after getting into Matthew's car, Alex posted one last image on his social media story. It was a simple shot of the car's interior, with a small heart emoji at the bottom. That was the final message he ever sent. Alex's closest friends, who often spoke with him about his new relationship, began to grow increasingly worried as time passed, especially when he kept asking for more money. At one point, Matthew told him that he was struggling financially and could no longer afford to send him anything. However, not long after, he transferred around $800. Alex's friends, whose identities were protected for legal reasons, later told the police that they were fully aware that what he was doing was wrong and had voiced their concerns to him. Despite their warnings, Alex chose to continue down the same path. The trial began on January 25, 2021. At Chester Crown Court, the jury heard that the two had only known each other for a few months but had been engaged in a secret and illegal relationship during that time. According to English law, a relationship between a 15-year-old and a 19-year-old is considered unlawful as the age of consent is 16. This means that any sexual activity involving a minor, regardless of their willingness, is strictly prohibited. In his testimony before the judge, Matthew admitted to striking Alex with a wrench but attempted to justify his actions, claiming that he had lost control after being blackmailed by the teenager. According to his version of events, he and Alex had first started talking in October 2019 through casual conversations. However, as time went on, Alex allegedly began sending him late-night messages, asking personal and suggestive questions, such as whether he was wearing any clothes. Matthew further claimed that Alex had tried to attack him before his death. He also stated that he had run out of money and had lost friends and family due to the situation. Though he never explicitly stated what the payments were for, he maintained that he was under significant pressure. Additionally, he told the court that he felt ashamed and deeply unsettled after being intimate with Alex. At some point, he said, he realized that what he was doing was wrong, not only because Alex was male, but also because of his age. During the trial, prosecutors presented the full details of Alex's conversations with Caitlin, who had been Matthew's girlfriend at the time. One of the detectives strongly refuted Matthew's claim that the murder was an act of impulse. Instead, he argued that Matthew had deliberately planned the attack. He had lured Alex to an isolated location, believing that no one would find out what he was about to do. During the victim impact statements, Alex's parents, Adam and Lisa, paid an emotional tribute to their son, describing him as a beautiful and loving boy. Lisa spoke through tears, saying that losing a child in such a horrific and brutal way was nothing short of living through hell. She emphasized that Alex had been raised in love, not fear, and had always been proud of who he was. He never had to hide behind a mask or pretend to be someone he wasn't. She condemned Matthew's actions, pointing out that although he had admitted to the crime early in the trial, he still forced their family to endure unnecessary trauma in a desperate attempt to reduce his sentence. According to Lisa, he never once considered the unbearable pain he inflicted on both families. She went on to call him the most selfish, cold, and calculating person she had ever encountered, criticizing his repeated attempts to shift the blame onto Alex and tarnish his name throughout the trial. Adam, on the other hand, remembered his son as a fun-loving, respectful young man who always cared about others' feelings. He admitted that he would never be able to overcome the loss and that their lives would never be the same again. After a trial that lasted a month and more than 9 hours of jury deliberation, the panel rejected Matthew's version of events and found him guilty by a majority verdict of 10-2. As he sat in the defendant's chair, sobbing, the judge delivered the sentencing. Given that he had used a weapon, the mandatory minimum sentence for his crime was set at 25 years. The judge described the killing as a premeditated murder, meticulously planned and executed without mercy. He also noted that while Alex may have initiated contact, It was clear that Matthew not only responded, but actively encouraged a sexual relationship. He pointed out that Matthew was far more experienced and worldly than his victim, who was still young and emotionally immature for his age. Furthermore, he stated that Matthew had carefully orchestrated the situation. While this may not have been his first sexual experience, it was for Alex. The judge concluded that Alex had naively made demands, but those demands stemmed from the sexual offenses committed by Matthew. The responsibility for what transpired did not fall on Alex. In determining the sentence, the judge underscored Matthew's complete lack of empathy and the utter disregard he showed for both the victim and his grieving family. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 28 years before parole eligibility. Despite the severity of the crime, Matthew's legal team filed an appeal against the sentence. On June 23, 2021, after reviewing both written and oral arguments, a panel of 3 appellate judges ruled that the original sentence had been excessively long. They decided to reduce the minimum term from 28 years to 26. Matthew's internal struggle, his inability to accept his own sexuality, and his fear of rejection created an emotional conflict that, when left unresolved, led to unimaginable pain and devastation. In his desperate attempt to escape a reality he refused to face, he destroyed not only his own future, but also the life of someone who embraced his identity without shame or fear.
Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.